Case 1. Chris Hill has built a reputation for exploring places most people wouldn't dare enter, especially alone and after dark. From forgotten hospitals to deserted military facilities, he spent years documenting locations that have long been left behind. In early 2023, Chris decided to revisit an abandoned elementary school in Cleveland that had been closed for nearly a decade. The building, once filled with students and teachers, had slowly fallen apart after its closure. Flooded hallways, peeling paint, broken furniture, and piles of debris now filled the structure. As he moved through the dark corridors, there were clear signs that someone had been there recently. Messages written on classroom whiteboards and scattered belongings suggested the building wasn't as abandoned as it appeared. Roughly 10 minutes into the exploration, Chris heard an unusual sound somewhere inside the school. At first, it sounded like movement in another room. Then he spotted something even more concerning: a flashlight beam shining down a hallway. Someone else was inside. Unsure whether it was another explorer, a squatter, or something worse, Chris chose not to announce himself. Instead, he quietly changed direction and continued exploring another section of the building. Later, while checking the upper floor bathrooms, he noticed what looked like a motionless figure standing in the darkness. The silhouette appeared human and was positioned at the far end of the room. Startled, Chris cautiously approached. Only after getting closer did he realize the figure wasn't a person at all. Someone had placed a life-sized mannequin inside the bathroom, likely as a prank to scare visitors. Most people would have ended the exploration right there, but Chris kept going. After spending more time inside the school, he climbed onto the roof to capture additional footage. The building was already in poor condition, making the climb risky. Fortunately, he made it back down safely. That's when the night became even stranger. While moving through another section of the school, he heard distant noises echoing through the hallways. Moments later, a shadow appeared to move behind a doorway. Chris immediately stopped. He searched the surrounding rooms but couldn't find anyone. By now, it seemed increasingly likely that multiple people were inside the building with him. Deciding it was time to leave, Chris headed toward the exit. But before he could get out, he heard what sounded like footsteps moving directly above him on a staircase. He called out. No answer. The footsteps stopped. After waiting for a response that never came, Chris quickly left the building and ended the exploration. To this day, nobody knows who else was inside the school that night, or whether they were intentionally following him through the building. Case 2. For more than a decade, Brian and Michael, the creators behind The Proper People, have traveled across the world documenting abandoned locations. Unlike many channels in the urban exploration community, they built their reputation by focusing on authentic experiences rather than staged scares. One of their most memorable encounters happened during a nighttime visit to the abandoned Bryce Hospital complex in Alabama. The massive psychiatric facility had been abandoned for decades. Years of neglect had left much of the structure in ruins. Walls had collapsed, graffiti covered nearly every surface, and nature had slowly begun reclaiming the property. As the two explorers made their way through the building, everything seemed normal. That changed when they reached one of the upper floors. While examining a staircase, one of them suddenly noticed something unusual through a distant window: a light. At first, it was easy to dismiss, but seconds later, it became clear the light was being held by a person standing on the opposite side of the building. The figure wasn't moving, it simply stood there watching. The situation became even stranger when Brian and Michael switched off their own lights. Almost immediately, the mysterious person turned off theirs as well. Whoever it was had clearly been observing them. Neither explorer had seen any vehicles outside when they arrived, meaning the stranger had likely reached the property on foot and may have been there long before they arrived. After calling out and receiving no response, the pair decided not to take any chances. Without waiting to find out who was watching them, they returned to their car and left the property. To this day, the identity of the person remains unknown. Case 3. In 2022, YouTuber Exploring with Tom and 3 friends decided to investigate an abandoned psychiatric hospital in the United Kingdom. The building had been closed for years and had gained a reputation among explorers for its unsettling atmosphere. From the moment they entered, the group was loud and energetic, shouting through hallways and joking with one another as they moved through the darkness. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then they began hearing noises. The sounds appeared to be coming from one of the nearby rooms. Curious, the group started calling out into the darkness to see if anyone was there. A few seconds later, they got their answer. A man suddenly screamed back at them from inside the building. The reaction was immediate. The entire group panicked and sprinted toward the exit without stopping to investigate. But the situation didn't end there. As they ran back toward their vehicle, the man appeared to chase after them. His voice continued echoing through the darkness as they scrambled to get away. Nobody knows exactly who he was. Many viewers believe he may have been a squatter or homeless person using the abandoned hospital as shelter, and became furious when a group of noisy teenagers disturbed him in the middle of the night. Fortunately, the explorers managed to reach their car and leave unharmed. Had they stayed any longer, the encounter could have ended very differently. Case 4. Some abandoned locations are unsettling because of what might be inside them. Others are disturbing because of what happened there. In December 2023, a YouTuber visited the abandoned property once used by one of America's most infamous kidnappers. Years earlier, a teenage girl had been abducted and held captive inside a hidden bunker beneath the property. For days, she endured unimaginable conditions while desperately searching for a way to escape. Eventually, through remarkable courage and determination, she managed to contact her family, leading authorities directly to the location and ending the nightmare. When the explorer entered the abandoned house years later, the atmosphere was heavy from the very beginning. Scattered throughout the property were strange objects and remnants left behind over the years. Among the items discovered was a small backpack that appeared to belong to a child. While there was no way to confirm where it came from, finding it inside a location connected to such a tragic event made the discovery deeply unsettling. The deeper he explored, the stranger the house became. Old furniture, discarded toys, damaged personal belongings, and random objects filled room after room. Some items appeared original to the property, while others looked as though they had been left by squatters who occupied the house long after the crime occurred. Every room seemed to carry a reminder of the horrific events that once took place there. Although the building now sits abandoned and silent, its history continues to cast a dark shadow over everyone who visits. Case 5. In the summer of 2023, Chris Hill traveled to a forgotten section of Cleveland, known for its abandoned buildings and troubled history. One of the locations he planned to explore was an old church that had stood empty for years. The structure looked exactly how you'd expect an abandoned church to look: broken windows, peeling walls, scattered debris, and signs of constant vandalism. As Chris moved through the building, he noticed small clues suggesting someone else had recently been there. Objects had been moved. Items appeared in places he didn't remember from previous visits. The feeling of being watched slowly began to grow. To document the exploration, Chris placed several cameras throughout the church before continuing his investigation. Roughly 10 minutes later, one of those cameras captured something unexpected. A door suddenly slammed shut on its own. There was no strong wind, no obvious explanation, and most importantly, Chris hadn't been anywhere near the door when it happened. Believing someone else might be inside, he searched the church from top to bottom. Nobody was there. Unable to find an answer, he left the church and continued exploring nearby houses. That's when things became even more unsettling. Inside one of the supposedly abandoned homes, Chris heard movement coming from upstairs. When he went to investigate, a person suddenly pulled back a curtain and looked directly at him. Realizing someone was actually living inside the house, Chris immediately apologized and left. The encounter revealed something unexpected. Many of the abandoned buildings on that street weren't abandoned at all. People were living inside them, and some of them clearly didn't want visitors. If you enjoyed this video and want more true stories, real-life mysteries, and unbelievable footage breakdowns, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves strange and fascinating cases. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.